I went away to find what I already know and have already known. This past 2 months of upheaval has been the green screen stage props backdrop for just that. Jesus says that you cannot serve two masters. My spiritual journey has followed a sequence of very profound peak experiences and breakthroughs to a new level, and the valleys or dark nights or pits of despair. They're not always one after the other or related, but as I recall and recount my story, there are a few very significant moments, instances, either initiated by something that happens outside, quote unquote, in my life, or inside. Before this current one, the last one was when I was 26, going on 27. Which astrologically is quite significant. And if you guys read all of my books so far, you've at least heard one version of this story that I'm getting ready to tell. Those 3 books combined kind of include all the pieces for this picture I'm painting. When I was 26 going on 27, I was afforded the opportunity to live rent-free by myself while I was going to massage school 3 days a week, which meant I didn't have a job either. And I was living in my mom's parents' house, a house that they had on the side as like investment or rental property, and it was tucked away back in the woods. So I would go to massage school 3 days a week, and then the other 4 days literally be in solitude, silence, prayer, practice, presence, meditation, yoga, journaling. That's in fact where the journals from Water Still were written. And if you read Water Still, and as I asked Kathleen or suggested to Kathleen to go and read it again in light of what she was experiencing at the retreat, you'll see, interestingly enough, though it was my first book that I wrote and the writings themselves came from the earliest in time, it's actually the most advanced of the three. And if you read it cognitively only, or if you read it and either one, don't already have an experience or a taste of the ultimate, or two, have the intention of letting it draw you into a taste or an experience or an entire dissolving into the ultimate, then you won't get it. It won't make sense. It'll be hard to read. Maybe it's nice poetry and that's kind of what you chalk it up to. Oh, that was a nice piece of writing, but I have no idea what it's about. And that's true with a lot of ancient scripture. There's many different lenses or ways to approach it or ways to read it. And all good art, those of you who are artists, know that all good art has the ability and the potential to draw the viewer or the listener or the receiver of it into the state of consciousness that the artist was in when it was being composed or written or whatever the form of it is. Water still has the potential for that. Because, in particular, I only lived at this house for 6 months. My birthday is June 30th. I moved there in January. And that's right before Saturn's return, as you guys either know or have heard me say, which is from 27 to 30 and then 57 to 60. Saturn is back at the place in the sky that it was when you were born. So Saturn takes 27 to 30, give or take 3 years to make one revolution around the sun. And Saturn is actually where we get our word Satan from. There's deep esoteric meaning imbued in that planet and the correlation with Satan in the Bible. You don't have to interpret it automatically as evil, but Saturn is a strongly intense, transformational, ruthless, masculine presence and energy. And the theme across the board, when Saturn is in your house or Satan is under your roof, whatever the devil meant for evil, God meant for good. And even in the Bible, in the book of Job, the tempter is not even allowed to do his work on someone without God's permission. So relate that interiorly as well, that everything that is sent your way is actually ultimately there for your journey, healing, next level breakthrough. And so Saturn is intended to bring up all of your unresolved shit from the past 27 to 30 years that you've not sufficiently worked through. So I don't know how many people that have been on the spiritual journey since childhood, like I was, have a similar story about the months leading up to Saturn's return. But my last 6 months of being 26 were spent not only circumstantially, physically, exteriorly in this house where I was alone, silent, in my practice with God, no TV, nothing else like that, in a very like steady, peaceful, deep rhythm, night and day. But it was the final, as I get ready to say the word unraveling, I see these tassels, the final unraveling of the separate self entity known as Kemper. Assisting along that process was the discovery of Muji. I've actually thought about, I have these guys and things, but thought about getting like little pictures of some of my other, people that are in the container, just so you can kind of have a face for them. Not like an altar to worship or anything, but like picture of Ken, picture of Father Thomas, picture of Muji, picture of Papa G. Anyway, Muji came to me during those 6 months through a very inspired, synchronistic, like I couldn't sleep one night, so I just came and I was looking up some YouTube videos on this other non-dual teacher, Lisa Cairns, who she's also very good. And I would watch her sometimes for some support and guidance. But over on the sidebar was this plump little jolly Jamaican man with dreads named Muji. And when it pops up in the same like search, it's like, wonder if he's saying sort of the same thing. And so I think I spent like the next 3 hours of that sleepless night watching Muji after Muji after Muji, and quickly graduated from Lisa Cairns, but she's still very good. And I had known about, it's okay, the ultimate reality, or what other teachers call the absolute. I had heard about it in yoga classes, even though most yoga teachers, when they're like telling you to become the witness or observe what's happening in your body, they're still doing it from the very relative sense, like just observe what's happening, as a person, as a mind. They're not pointing to the ultimate witness, but it is kind of a cliche and popular term that's used a lot in yoga classes. Become the witness, be the witness. And it's clear that they don't entirely understand what they're even saying. Right? But I had also been introduced to these concepts of the ultimate in Ken's work. Ken says this phrase, this term, that's necessary but not sufficient. And I'm going to use that a couple of times as I'm talking now. He says that cognitive understanding, or at least cognitive engagement towards something, especially the ultimates, but also deep healing, transformation, and growing up through the stages of consciousness, that cognitive engagement and understanding of that is necessary, but not sufficient, not enough to actually make it happen or actually embody it. That requires time, that requires grace, that requires what the Zen people call a happy accident. It's you do the work until bingo, one day it happens. There's also a phrase that is to have a sadhana, which is the Sanskrit word for practice, spiritual daily practice. To have a sadhana is to have already missed the ultimate, because it's always already here. Therefore, practice can't get you there. But to not have a sadhana, was that a Freudian slip? Sadhana? Was that almost a weird word? Yeah, sorry. To not have a sadhana, one always remains an ignoramus. That's like, or always will be unenlightened. So the word is ignoramus in the phrase I've heard. So to have a spiritual practice already misses the ultimate. But to not have a spiritual practice, you will get nowhere. Or you will remain unenlightened. And so, another plug for Water Still is that a cognitive attempt to understand the ultimate, even in the unnamed Kalyana way, in the ultimate section and the Who Am I section, which is 2 out of the 5 chapters, so a big portion of the book, I give cognitive, intellectual examples, like when my math teacher in high school, and this was before I knew anything about this ultimate business, told us, it was geometry class, Miss McCabe, who always smelled like cigarettes and had yellow fingernails. Start right here, from here to the wall, and half your distance to it. You can either walk halfway to the wall or just mentally take yourself halfway to the wall. Okay? Now, there's your new starting point. Go halfway to the wall again. Okay? Go halfway to the wall again. Go halfway to the wall again. Go halfway to the wall again. Here's the Cullen question. If you continue doing that, will you ever get to the wall? Ever? The answer is no. So the answer is no in a cognitive sense, in a mathematical, geometrical sense, and then hopefully that explodes your mind a little bit and takes your cognition toward infinity, toward the concept of infinity, towards a concept of intellectual understanding of the ultimate through a relative kind of tool of mathematics. So that cognition is necessary, but not enough, not good enough to actually see it, be it yourself. That's where God comes in. That's where grace comes in. That's where your practice comes in. That's where the happy accident eventually happens. But that, in high school, was one of my first, without knowing it, glimpses of the ultimate. And it blew my mind. Thank God for Miss McCabe. I'll put her picture up in here too. I don't know if anybody else in my math class had that same, I mean, some of the greatest mathematicians, in history were deeply spiritual people and have these profound insights about God through numbers and shapes, a la sacred geometry and other things. Even this pointing that Muji gives about being the 0 point. It's kind of the origin point that we've talked about in gathering a couple months ago. Once you start counting 1, when you say count to 10, and everybody starts at 1, nobody says 0 first. Once you have 1, then you have to have 2, and then once you have 2, you have to have 3, and then once you step into the realm of relativity or form or phenomena, then it's what the Taoists call the world of 10,000 things. And if you step into that world, that's where suffering, that's where duality, that's where separation starts from and proliferates. So Muji says, you stay 0. Just that pointing itself, can you get a sense for what that 0 place might feel like as an ultimate kind of formless, empty, but also full of the potential for 1 through 10 and to a billion and beyond. That's why they say the world of form is multiplicitous. It actually doesn't end. Just like you can't get all the way to the wall, half and half and half and half and half and half. That's where you get to a cognitive understanding of fractals. It doesn't end. A fractal repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself, and there is literally no end, even in the relative scale of things. It's higher and higher and higher and more refined, more subtle octaves of vibration. Even if our current kind of bandwidth is limited to what we see and hear and understand here, at least you can project your understanding into a possibility of infinity or eternity or endlessness in the relative. But that still is not the ultimate itself. So my pump was primed throughout my whole spiritual journey, through reading Ken Wilber cognitively, through this high school awakening experience, through hearing what these yoga teachers are saying about the witness, like even hearing that word, which is nothing from childhood or Christian world, even if now my opinion is that they didn't know what they were talking about, at least them saying, be the witness, I kind of tuned into like, what could that be? What is this witness thing? Be neutral. Don't have any judgments. You hear me still say that in yoga class. Don't label it. Don't judge it. Be neutral. Just witness. If that's done as a relative body-mind, it's a good step. But still, there's effort in not judging, effort in not labeling, effort in just observing and not making an opinion. The ultimate, the absolute, in an experiential way, always, already is effortless. It's the effortlessness of your beingness right now. The risk in calling it ultimate or absolute, or even a thing, because words can't even say it, is that when we think ultimate, we think like, oh, at the top of this mountain where I'm not, or like way over there, the ultimate thing, the absolute thing, and I'm not there. But that's just the way we're conditioned to think about everything. What it means is the final, absolute, unwavering, unquestioned, unshakable, ultimate anything that you could possibly experience right now and right here. It's always there. It's always who you are as your deepest self. It's always effortless as well. So if there's any effort, it's not it. But just like that sadhana koan, if you don't make effort, the happy accident probably won't come. Only a few rare beings throughout history get the kind of full enlightenment download, either like out of the womb or early in childhood or all at once without really having to work for it. So even this concept of work, as you guys have heard, doesn't say it either. We talk about do the work. Practice isn't a great word either, because practice presumes that it's not the real thing, or that something that you're preparing for in practice. Work has a lot of connotation around something we don't want to do. But this whole field that we're in and that I'm magnetizing you in through my journey and process, I want it to be, it is just who I am, is my quote unquote lifestyle without it even being like a lifestyle. Jesus actually said they were challenging him about why he didn't rest on the Sabbath or something like that, or why he did such and such on the Sabbath and not rest. And he said, my Father is always working. Therefore, why would I not be working? So he was kind of revamping that word work as well, work and rest. And so I want all of you to more and more make this way infused into your life. Sometimes you take a little break from meditating. Sometimes meditation frequency increases or decreases. But if it's important enough to you for healing, for transformation, for enlightenment, for knowing yourself, for suffering vanishing, then you will poke at it until the curtain tears into for you. And then there is self-evident fruits of the work to where it doesn't feel like work anymore. And it's a joy to meditate. It's a joy. It's effortless. It's easy to weed the garden because the fruit are just coming spontaneously, and you've trained your apparatus to handle trauma, unexpected events, devastation, loss, grief that will still happen. But it becomes more automatic, and you have a reservoir to draw from, you have reserves, you have resources that happen more and more spontaneously. So the effortlessness of your being right now. Let's take a little moment away from my story and feel into that, not cognitively, not thinking about it, not being as in who you claim to be as a person, but beingness itself or existence itself. If there's any effort that you have to make, That's not what I'm pointing to, so just turn away from that. The most simple, most effortless space of being that you can find right now. There is such thing as relative effortlessness, but that in and of itself requires a little effort. Make it effortless. No, this is already effortless. You don't have to do anything or be anything to simply be. You simply are. And answer this to yourself. In this space, are you, whoever you call yourself by name, it's not an opinion. It's not a right or wrong answer. There is just only one answer if you're there. The answer is no. Are you in this effortless space of being, man or woman, just being? Are you human? Are you a soul even? Are you a self even? If some of these get a little subtle, the answer is still no, but wait until you catch that breeze yourself. Is there suffering here? The simplest, already effortless, simple being. Is there a past here? Is there a future here? The mind jumps in with past and future thoughts, and it requires effort. So no. In simple being, that you don't have to do any practice to find. But at the same time, if you've not done some practice to decondition, deconstruct, massage the contraction of selfness or assumption, then the simplest thing might not be so easy. So this space, if you have sufficiently found it, is what I spent 6 months in chronological time in. Kemper was gone. OCD was gone. Addiction was gone. Time was gone. Here's another question as you stay in that space. Is there time here? One of the Psalms, which was turned into one of my favorite praise and worship songs over the years. It says, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. So whether you spend one instant in time or 5 minutes or 6 months or years and years and years at a monastery in this space of infinity and eternity, timelessness, simple beingness, it's the same. But I spent 6 months basically always only here and deepening it, deepening it, deepening it, deepening it, deepening. And could have died in any moment. Thought I might. Kind of wanted to. Had reached a climax or a culmination of my journey so far. Had embodied in a real rooted experiential way the ultimate reality as my truest own self. I've been watching some Papaji satsangs lately, which is Muji's teacher. And I actually heard him say that he has seen people die on the spot with getting this glimpse. And he was saying that just simply meant that that body-mind relative apparatus kind of had all of its karma, all of its destiny or purpose burned up at once in the fire of that ultimate seeing and had no more reason to keep going. And so I spent then kind of the next 6 months, once I turned 27, in Chicago. I moved to Chicago actually on my 27th birthday when I realized that I wasn't going to die, or at least it didn't seem like I was ready to die yet. And carried that sweet, blissful, ultimate space of no suffering, no separateness, no past, no future, no Kemper, no OCD, no addiction, no problems. In time and space, to another city, to another state. It just kind of felt like this momentum took me there. I was no longer making any decisions, really. And at the end of that year, December, so this is a year January to December, right in the middle of which I turned 27, which initiates Satan coming to visit, Saturn's return. And in that space of blissful meaninglessness, and you have to really see it to understand the bliss of that. Blissful, nothing means anything. And meaning itself, just like time and 1, 2, 3, causes suffering. You give this one thing a certain meaning, then a story gets created around it that either lives up to or doesn't your expectations, which causes suffering. if you're doing all of this just from kind of a deconstructed, postmodern philosophical, relative, cognitive thing, like nothing means anything, then sure, that's very kind of depressing. That's why a lot of, philosophers and postmodern thinkers are kind of in this malaise of, well, meaninglessness. Nothing means anything. But then if you transcend it into an ultimate experience through spiritual practice and this kind of work, then a brand new light shines on meaninglessness, purposelessness, selflessness, desirelessness, because we don't like that one either. Like the first tenet of Buddhism, or one of the ones, is that desire is what causes suffering. But we like desire. We like to desire family and friends and good food, and we like to desire good things. But with that kind of desire also becomes aversion. It's simple. If you desire this, you don't desire that. If you strongly desire this, then you'll be strongly adverse to this thing. And well, what if this thing happens? Who are you then? So in this transcendent solitude of deep silence and peace, kind of for the first time in my life, when the clock was still ticking and this body was still moving and time and space were still operating and sensations were still coming and experiences were still happening, even if seen from an ultimate place of not happening to anyone, there's nobody here. The I has vanished. There's just this. There's just the ultimate. There's just presence, moment to moment. Combined with Saturn's return kicking in, and if we go on what Papaji said, since I didn't die, then there was still some stuff that this body-mind needed to work on or work through, or even from an impersonal place, become personal again. I got really bored and kind of lonely and starting to get a little depressed. There's a theme throughout my life of things happening kind of like too soon, like being beyond my years in understanding or maturity or whatever. 7-year-old thing, this thing at 27. This kind of ultimate breakthrough that I had is probably best with like an airplane approach through life. And then the last like 10 minutes before you die, be in that blissful space and then vanish onto the next, on the other side of the curtain. But I've been left with, or I'll stay with the storyline, I was left with this kind of juxtaposition between ultimate and relative. And when God, in God's fullness, this is in the part 1 of the Married Monk book, in God's fullness and emptiness at the same time, nothing to do, nowhere to be, only rich and ripe with infinite potential, kind of having reached an apex of oneness. Then so same as like rock bottom, when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go but up. When you've reached this kind of enlightenment, and I didn't just run away to a monastery or die, I still had to work and pay bills, things. I did a very interesting and intentional experiment. Kind of like God did. Please, guys, know me by now. I'm not like comparing myself to God, but it's a metaphor. With such emptiness and fullness, there's only one way to go, down to kind of experience it all again from this new place. That which I had been freed from, is it possible to get entangled again? Is it possible to become a person again? Is it possible to try on suffering again? Is it possible to engage duality again, time and space, without losing that I had discovered? They say that when God created the world, he got lost in form. And that's what we're doing, is form returning back to God and God remembering itself again. I don't know where I got this crazy idea. It was just part of my path. Never heard anybody else do it. Wasn't copying any teacher, mimicking anything I heard. I intentionally, from that place, put out of my boredom. I've heard it called profound boredom. In the ultimate place, when there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, it can be profoundly boring. In a blissful way, but then if it gets combined with like, well, the time's still ticking and I'm living all alone in Chicago, and what else am I going to do? And I'm still 27 with all of this understanding and experience beyond my years. And I know there's nothing I have to do anymore. I've deconstructed all meaning and purpose and whatever. I don't have to do anything anybody tells me to do, including the government, including my parents, including my boss. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? To express this through this form. And so I intentionally, it's in my journals, I can show you, asked to feel again. Asked to suffer again. Asked to have meaning again. Asked to have a purpose again. Asked to experience the full range of human emotions, even the worst, again. I even said, I'll do this 1,000 more times, because from that ultimate place, it doesn't matter. If the consciousness is rooted there, anything can come and it will not waver. Effortlessly. Not more than a few days or weeks later, just like writing this book and be careful what happens, I sparked up a kind of like old flame with a new flame with an old friend. We kind of started talking and dating, and then a series of events, which I'll fast forward through, led me away from Chicago to Denver to Christie, with meaning and feelings and personality and humanness and connection and emotions and suffering. But still mostly rooted, if you think like maybe 1 foot here and 1 foot there, still most of my weight back here in the ultimate. And just kind of like, oh, that's fun to have a girlfriend again, and that's fun to like have meaning again, and that's fun to enjoy things again, and that's fun to have emotions again. Whenever this happy accident happens, it's different for each individual. So again, some people just die. Some people go to a monastery. Some people continue their life perfectly as it was. It's like light gets imbued into what you were already doing. So don't let any of this, scare you from continuing to, because it is the most beautiful, sublime, liberating precious pearl in existence. That's why they call it the ultimate. But I consciously kind of gave up eternity for. They didn't say God created the world because he got bored. I remember that in Sunday school. And he wanted some playmates. So I consciously did this. If you know, they say where you like, I, Kemper, in sane and sound mind, with my own hand, agree to these terms. Because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have anything else to do. And because that kind of pull into form, once you say one, it's two and three and four, and you're gone. I also am not saying I made a mistake here, but it was just the adventure back to these last 2 weeks where I remembered what I didn't forget. Paradox. Put didn't in parentheses. Remembered what I did not forget, though I did. But I didn't. If you could only just, see all the paradoxes in my mind as I'm telling the story. So once it starts to pull you, once form starts to pull you, attachment, addiction, feelings. I'm not saying addiction resurfaced. I'm saying just you get addicted to things. You get pulled by and start clinging to meaning and this versus that, and attachment and aversion and like and dislike and story and purpose and separation and hurt and pain and suffering, and also the relative opposites. I've been happier these past 5 years with Christy. This is the praises that I sing in this book. Happier than I've been my entire life. Not happier than this ultimate space of being. And I'm not just saying this now, like picking up the pieces and whatever. Relatively happier in my last 5 years with Christy than any other relative happiness in my life. Nothing compares to that's why they call it Satchidananda, being consciousness bliss, of oneness with the divine, oneness with yourself, disillusion of separateness, disillusion of your contracted identity as your name or gender or human or role that you play. However it gets played out, that beingness, nothing compares to it. Nothing, nothing, nothing. But with that highest relative happiness in these last 5 years came the lowest relative crash of my life. That's karma. That's the laws of spiritual physics. That's how it works. I remember when I was first starting to play with this, Mom, and I would, like years ago, maybe during those high school or maybe the beginning of discovering yoga, before I had a deep understanding of it, something beyond the duality or transcending into an ultimate space, I would be in this kind of stoic place of not desiring or being it was very just neutral, because I knew that, it's like even just like happiness of enjoying a meal. It's sad when the meal is over. Or enjoying time with a friend and it's sad. Even just these very normal to life things. Oh, it's sad when they have to go. Just the normal happiness of something you enjoy, and then it's sad when it's over. And so increase that exponentially depending on how much you love that thing or how much you put into that thing and what it's going to feel like. Okay, so I remember mom saying like, well, does that mean like you don't ever, it's like, well, that's life. Like sadness, when you love a lot, you hurt a lot. That's all still relative. And you were right, but I was also on to something else. And I knew that either one of those dualisms would be in this ping pong oscillation of suffering, because there's a drop of suffering in each side. I knew I was headed to the next thing. And it is depressing, or a lot of people do just live that kind of life. Like, well, that's just life. Yeah, you got to say goodbye to people, or you got to let go of things. And that's true. But some of us are called to a different path, and some of us just see inherently and can't stand that kind of grind, that grinding of back and forth, or the intensity of letting go all the time in a relative way. Hold on, let go, hold on, let go, hold on, let go. So go back to what my crucifix told me, what Jesus told me before all this happened. You can't hold on to anything. He didn't say let go of everything. That would have been him talking to me as a relative person. He didn't say, what was that one I just said? He didn't say don't hold on to anything, and he didn't say let go of everything, because that would have been something I'm doing. But you can't. You can't. You as the ultimate space, I as the ultimate space, can't hold on to anything, is never holding on to anything, never has, therefore doesn't have to let go, therefore holds the entirety of everything in its one embrace, all the dualities, up and down, back and forth, including suffering, without itself suffering. And so I have come to back full circle, but from a way higher or deeper place. I knew this whole time that when either like something sticky would happen with me and Christy over these 5 years, or just in these past couple months, I knew that hook, that intentional conscious thing that I did back 6 years ago of hooking back in, trying out this experiment, I knew that was the hook that needed to go. Regardless of what's happened, regardless of what you guys think have happened, regardless of what I've shared with you and has happened, doesn't matter. I knew the only way, and I'm telling you guys now, the only way, and some of you have really experienced and tasted this ultimate place, and at least intuit what I'm saying. Some of you put it to the side because it's too hard, too challenging, and like thinking about projection or doing yoga or working on ego stuff or whatever is easier, because that's how you identify, is as the relative self. So out of the 5 basics, out of everything Kemper talks about, that's manageable, that's accessible, because that's how I relate to myself, is as a person. So I'm going to focus my attention on projection work. It's great. All the 5 basics still apply. All of the practices, all the work, all the principles, everything I talk about, still in the game. The only way out of suffering is through the ultimate. So if you're not spending at least a little time there, at least thinking about it cognitively, reading about it, some Ken books, my books, Muji videos, you will always suffer. You might find a way to relatively suffer less. And some teachers, some traditions, that's enough. And that's okay. But that's not this path. Your ultimate identity, who you are naturally, effortlessly in this and every moment, is already beyond suffering, is already not holding on to anything, is already at perfect peace, unity, harmony, oneness. Now, you also hear me say, again, I'll use this phrase, necessary but not sufficient, because you are still left with, and that's why I've blazed this trail and made the mistakes or done the experiments so I can teach you the pitfalls or where not to step. Follow in my footsteps, not where I went off and did a little experiment. Don't follow that trail. Follow the footsteps that I've officially laid out. Because you're still left with this body mind. You're still left with some relative experience if you don't just burn up and die completely in the flash of the ultimate. That's where weeding the garden, that's where setting your navigational compass toward positive rather than negative, light rather than dark, good habits, healthy lifestyle, etc. But those things will not get you the ultimate. Those things will not stop suffering. Those things will not make you happy. Still, happiness is never found in the relative at all, ever, never has been, never will be.